Oh, it's showing right away.
All right.
It popped up. Nice.
Good stuff. All right. Hello and welcome to the PFF live Q&A. I am Doug Kyed, joined as always by Ari Meirov and Brad Spielberger. Ari, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good to be back. Missed it on Monday, which was a shame. Obviously missed not being here, but we're back here for the first time on a Thursday, which is very exciting. And I'm looking forward to a game tonight between the last two number one overall picks. So it should be a fun game, and we have a lot of things to talk about. It's been a busy week.
Absolutely. Brad, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah, first matchup since Kyler and Baker of number one overall picks. Should be fun. It is Bengals Jaguars on Thursday, but hey, primetime has treated us well. Last Thursday we had Giants Washington, which we all probably rolled our eyes at, and it was a classic. So I think tonight should be fun.
I don't know how you guys are, but like every Tuesday, I'm like, how do I have to wait 2 more days for football? I know that kind of shows how addicted to the game I am and how pathetic my life is, that on Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm like, I have no idea what to do with my time, but that's 1000% how I feel every Tuesday and Wednesday. So I will watch any NFL game on Thursday night. And yeah, Trevor Lawrence versus Joe Burrow definitely makes it exciting. Drop any of your comments that you have in the comments section, but we definitely have a lot of news to hit on off the top of our show. And let's start off with the biggest news of Wednesday, and that's that cornerback Richard Sherman announced on the Richard Sherman podcast on PFF.com that he is joining the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Definitely could make a big impact for Tampa Bay since they put Sean Murphy-Bunting on injured reserve, Jamel Dean dealing with a bit of a knee injury. But I think that I'm going to steal your pun, Brad, that the rich get Richard. The Super Bowl champions add a player like Richard Sherman. And yeah, I mean, obviously that can only help. But Ari, what type of impact can you see Richard Sherman making on the Bucs?
Well, it's interesting because, if you listen to that full episode that he did, I mean, he kind of mentioned, first of all, just the shape that he's in right now. He's really trimmed down back to his weight that he was in when he was with Seattle. And, this is a guy who we all know about the leadership that he's going to bring to the locker room. Not that Tampa Bay really needs it because they have so many veterans already there. But, they had a secondary need there, as you mentioned, after Sean Murphy-Bunting went down. And now he could potentially help fill that void. And that's really what they're looking for. And you got to, respect the hustle of this front office to continue to add players onto this team, especially like in season as well. They're always, pushing, Brad could mention all the cap situation with them, but, they've like pushed so much money to the future to try to win right now. And Tom Brady has a lot to do with that. We heard Richard talk about how Tom gave him the call about you should come down here, and when Tom calls you really cannot say no. So, he's gonna make an impact there on the field. I think he was pretty good a couple years ago in San Francisco when he played pretty much a full season. Last year he was a little bit hammered with injuries, but it looks like he's in a good spot mentally. We'll see how he does on the field, but based off what he is saying, it sounds like he's ready to go, and he's gonna be there for another chance to win a ring. And it's crazy to think about that. He's going to play with Tom Brady now. If you just look at his career in Seattle, he had all the beef with San Francisco, ended up there. He had some beef with Trent Williams, ended up playing with him, and he had some beef with Tom Brady. Now he's playing with him as well. So his career has been quite the journey, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it might show, Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to jump in real quick. Yeah, in 2012, they had the infamous You Mad Bro game, which really, I mean, that was when Richard Sherman really hit a higher profile to a lot of people. At PFF, he was highly graded, even as a rookie in 2011, even better in 2012. Then he had that You Mad Bro game against Tom Brady in 2012. Tom Brady got back at him in 2014 with Super Bowl 49. But I just want to mention the contract before, Brad, you can touch on that a little bit. It's a 1-year deal, up to $2.25 million, base salary right around $1 million, just because he is missing 3 games. But very, playtime incentive based and some roster bonuses in there. So, Brad, what do you make of the contract there for Richard Sherman?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, just so it's very clear to everyone, Doug Kyed broke that information yesterday, that contract news. So if you saw it elsewhere, I'm not sure who their source was, but they were several hours late on that news. But anyways, it's a decent contract for Sherman. This late in the game, when you're signing in season, getting anything above the veteran minimum is probably a win. And then you mentioned those incentives, which are key for him. They're tied to snap counts and then tied to making the playoffs, where he can get an additional $300,000, $600,000, or $900,000 on top of what his base value is. But I think Ari nailed it on the head. This roster construction is really impressive in Tampa Bay in that they have no holes or very few holes, and the holes they do have are depth, or maybe one spot you could point to is cornerback. And they lose their slot corner and Sean Murphy-Bunting early in the season. And Jamel Dean is a guy who had a couple injuries in college, but also is a risk taker. And there are great risk-taking cornerbacks in the NFL. You look at like a Marcus Peters, like there's guys that excel in that role. But I think almost matchup specific, switching out him and Sherman, depending on health or depending on the situation, they can kind of mix and match corners now. Ross Cockrell's another guy that can play inside, can play outside, can do a lot of different things. So I think it just makes them also more dynamic on the back end. They can give offenses more fits. I think it's a great addition.
Yeah, I think Steve Palazzolo from PFF, my cousin Steve, has said in the past that your team always needs a cornerback. No matter what, your team always needs a cornerback. You always need defensive back help. With the amount of wide receivers that are on the field these days, I mean, you look at last season with the Patriots, they had 7 defensive backs on the field a lot of the time last season. So even if you've got 2 or 3 solid starting cornerbacks, you can always need more. We're talking about the Bucs right now, so let's get into Buccaneers-Patriots, biggest game of the weekend. Biggest regular season game of the season, with Tom Brady coming back to Foxborough, Sunday Night Football, Chris Collinsworth on the call. Let's just get into that game a little bit. First of all, we did find out yesterday via multiple reports that James White will be out for the season. So the Patriots might be scrambling a little bit for a pass catching back in that game. Bucs also dealing with some injuries. Rob Gronkowski did not practice the last couple of days. Gio Bernard, their pass catching back, hasn't been practicing. Jason Pierre-Paul as well. So those are definitely some things to watch for in that matchup. And then I found this interesting yesterday, is that when Bill Belichick was talking about this matchup, he said that Tom Brady is essentially running the same offense that he ran with the Patriots. I think that the terminology is probably a little bit different with him playing under Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich, but the way that Bill Belichick was saying it is that he recognized everything that Tom Brady was doing out there. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conversations about who's got the bigger advantage between, Tom Brady knowing Bill Belichick knowing Tom Brady. I'm not sure if this is the way the game is going to go, but I actually might give that slight edge to Bill Belichick, since he knows the player so well in Tom Brady. Tom Brady doesn't have, there's been some turnover there on the Patriots defense. They like to mix their coverages. They like to change things up a bit. In the pure who knows who better, I might give the edge to Bill Belichick there. But Ari, what will you be watching for in this matchup?
I've just really been looking at just the build up to this game, which has been fascinating to me, because I look at it like Brady and Belichick have been playing along with all this drama stuff. That's what it feels like. Like these guys could have had their weekly press conferences this week and sung praises about each other, about all the success the past 20 years, the 6 championships, all of that. And it feels like they're just, they're not doing much of that. They're just, like one of Belichick's answers this week was like, I answered it in the statement that I put out after he signed. Like it feels so weird. Like Alex Guerrero came out with something as well, talking about Belichick. I found it pretty odd about that. And I kind of just want to see how this all plays out this week on the field. Like I'm really curious to see that. And the other thing that's kind of lost in the shuffle of all of this is that this is a pretty big opportunity for Mac Jones as well. Like this is going to be like a playoff atmosphere type of situation there. And for a rookie quarterback to be in that type of situation early on, you kind of want to see him do how he does in that game. And if he just plays well, even if it's in a loss, I think just his confidence level overall is going to skyrocket. So I'm kind of curious to see that as well. But overall, the Brady Belichick factor is going to be interesting. I read this week that there's extra security game that they're at the game because of the all the handshakes and everything. Everyone's going to be on the field, so it's kind of a Super Bowl type of a feel as well. So all that into it is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, no, there's a ton of, great individual matchups. Like Doug mentioned, there's some key injuries for both sides. I think if it does get into a game where, because of the knowledge that both sides have of each other, that maybe the margins are a little bit slimmer and chances are fewer and far between, I'm shouting out Steve Palazzolo again. So a big run for Steve today.
Steve.
He deserves it. He had some good stats this morning. The Patriots defense has allowed a passer rating of 30.3. on 10-plus yard throws, which is the best rate in the league. And then Tom Brady has 600 passing yards already on 10-plus yards throws, which is number one in the league. So, that I think is going to be the biggest, if I'm honest, I think the Bucs win this game. I'm not going to say handily because it's Bill Belichick. I think they're going to win by probably 2 scores. But if they limit the Bucs downfield and force, kind of shrink things in and force them to, chug away and have 14-play drives and stuff like that, then maybe they can stay in the game. Mac Jones can pick his spots. But I do think the Bucs are probably going to come out, victorious this Sunday.
I did want to touch on some interesting potential trades that are going around in the NFL. Last week, we saw that Jamie Collins was not able to be traded. The Lions wound up cutting him. I think that we all had a pretty good idea that that was going to be the result of that in Detroit. I think that Dan Campbell, the Lions head coach, was actually maybe a little bit too open, honest, and transparent about what they were going to be doing with Jamie Collins. I don't think that any teams really wanted to give up an asset for someone who was, going to wind up being free. So we'll see if something similar happens with Marlon Mack in Indianapolis. I do think it will be easier for the Colts to trade Marlon Mack just because he's a younger player. He's at a position where a lot of teams are kind of scrambling for running backs right now. I touched on the Patriots earlier. They lost James White for the season. The Ravens have been going through some issues at running back. 49ers have been going through some issues. So you've seen guys like, Devontae Freeman and Le'Veon Bell getting picked up, and you might not have seen that happening in years past without all these other injuries. Marlon Mack did acknowledge today that, that is a mutual decision that he and the Colts have reached, that he wants to be traded. But then the other one is Marcus May, the Jets safety. He'll be out for 3 to 4 weeks with an ankle injury. That was reported yesterday. And then his agent, Eric Burkhardt, gave a very interesting comment, one that would lead some people to post that eyeball emoji, that he'll be healthy right in time for the trade deadline. So that was certainly interesting. So that's another one where we might have to wait 3 to 4 weeks to see if that's going to happen. But yeah, it's certainly a possibility that Marcus May could be dealt if his agent, Eric Burkhardt, gets what he wants. Just on Marcus May, Brad, what would be the contract implications if a trade did go through for him?
Yeah, so depending on the week of the season, we're now in an 18-week schedule in terms of paying out salary. But I want to say off the top of my head, his franchise tag is about $10 or $11 million. So let's say we're halfway through the season, just half of that, you chop it right in half, and that would travel to the new club. I don't see any team really stepping in and paying Marcus May $5 or $6 million to play for them for half a season and then to potentially, negotiate an extension after the season. A quick note from CBA, you can't extend him until after the year. So a team would bring him in and wouldn't really be able to have the assurance and security they're going to have him long term. I also just think, look, he's going to be, I want to say 28 or 29 next year when you do get him in your first year in the building. A bit of an older draft pick, one of the oldest guys in his class. I don't think there's going to be a market for him in a trade. As much as his agent, look, it's understandable. I think we're going to see some more as we approach the deadline. When you're in a contract year and you're not maybe getting touches or not being used well, like a Marlon Mack who is coming off the injury, but they're going to want out because they need to showcase their talent before we hit free agency. And I think we're going to see more of this continue.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that the Jets have, traded veterans here in the past couple of years. They did have Leonard Williams, they did have Avery Williamson. So they've done it in the past, and it might just make sense to move on because it's become pretty clear that the relationship there between the agent and the team is kind of broken. It's not the first time that Burkhardt has tweeted something negative about the Jets. It's actually the second or third time already. So clearly something is wrong there. He's 28 or 29 years old, as Brad mentioned. They likely will not re-sign him after the year. So it might make sense to trade him, but the hard part will be finding a trade partner, especially coming off an injury. So it's definitely one to watch. Jets are 0-3 so far. Not off to a great start offensively, but we'll see what happens when he does come back before the trade deadline.
Before we get out of here, let's just talk about some of the injuries that we're monitoring throughout the week with the games coming up on Sunday. I'll toss a couple of them out there. Colts running back Jonathan Taylor, he was limited in practice yesterday, but I'm told that it's something very minor, just a bruise on his knee. He will be good to go. But another one is Packers wide receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He missed practice on Wednesday and on Thursday with hamstring injuries. I'm told that it's not a situation that's serious enough for an MRI, but I also don't think that it's a sure thing at this point that he will be good to go in week 4. So that's something that we might know more about that either tonight or tomorrow morning, but certainly something that could affect the Packers offense since, that offense really runs through Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, and Aaron Jones, but Marquez Valdez-Scantling is really their number 2 pass catcher, at least a wide receiver, so that would certainly impact them. Are any injuries that you're kind of monitoring throughout the week here?
Yeah, let's just say 2 probably. Antonio Gibson in Washington missed practice today with a shin injury. We'll see if he practices tomorrow, but if he does not, that's one to watch. Lamar Jackson in Baltimore missing a second day today with a back injury. He's missed practices before. Last week it was an illness, but we'll see again with him as well. That's a little bit more concerning because the illness we knew was something minor. This one we really haven't heard much about. And then 2 more. Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, both for the Giants, not practicing today. Doesn't look good for them for week 4 against the Saints in New Orleans. By the way, their first game back after Hurricane Ida. I could just imagine the noise that's going to be there. It's going to be pretty raucous over there.
Yeah, no, the Giants are in for a long afternoon. They've injured on the offensive line as well. So you mentioned the receivers, but also Ben Bredesen, who they, brought in at the very end of the offseason. He's now dealing with an injury. They might be on their, I want to say 4th left guard already. It might be 3rd left guard, but regardless, not a good position to be in, like you said, against a Saints team with a good defensive front that also, if you guys haven't been to the Superdome, it's the loudest experience I've ever, stadium I've ever been to. And like you said, first home game, coming off Hurricane Ida, I think that environment and atmosphere is going to be raucous. You mentioned the Ravens too. Doug, you know more on this. And I think folks like to hear about it, what the situation is with Rashad Bateman working his way back into the fold.
For sure, yeah. He had groin surgery after getting injured over the summer. He was activated, or he was designated to return off of injured reserve. And it sounds like it's possible that he could play this week. He did return to practice on Wednesday. I don't think it's a sure thing at this point. I think that they want to monitor him throughout the week. Ultimately, that's going to be a call for John Harbaugh. But I was told that, Bateman is moving well on that groin, looks like his normal self. So it just might, depend on how he reacts in practice. But they also got Miles Boykin back at wide receiver as well. They've got some season-ending injuries that obviously they won't be able to recover from, but guys like Bateman, guys like Boykin, that will certainly help their offense. Just before we get out of here, also just Steelers defense, monitoring TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith. They really kind of struggled to get off the passer last week, so it'll be very important for them to get Watt and Highsmith back in there. But thanks for watching. Keep it on PFF.com. Check out our props for Thursday Night Football. Go to PFF.com for our PFF Green Line, and then follow Ari on Twitter at MySportsUpdate. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad, and give me a follow at Doug Kyed. We will be back on Monday, probably around noontime, but you guys will be sure to see it on Twitter when we do go live again.